There is a sign at Rainbow Bridge National Monument in southern Utah. It was put there by the United States National Park Service. It reads simply, "Please do not approach or walk under Rainbow Bridge." No explanation of what will happen if you do, no threat of a fine, no law enforcement consequence, just a request, and from the federal government, that you stop before you reach the arch and look at it from a distance instead. Most tourists ignore it. They walk under anyway, and they take their photographs and they get back on their boats and they go home, never knowing what they walked through or what the Navajo people say was already there. This is the story of a place that was sacred for 1,000 years before the United States of America existed, and what happened when the modern world decided it wanted to visit. Hidden at the base of Navajo Mountain in one of the most remote canyon systems in the American Southwest, Rainbow Bridge rises 290 feet from the canyon floor. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty. Its sandstone arch spans 275 feet from one side of the canyon to the other. For scale, the dome of the United States Capitol building would fit beneath it. It is the largest natural bridge in North America, and for most of human history in this region, almost no one outside the tribes who lived here knew it existed. The Navajo people call it Nonnezoshe. The translation is not the big arch or the stone bridge. It is not named for what it looks like from the outside. The name they gave it translates as rainbow turned to stone. That is a theological statement, not a geological one. They were not describing the arch's shape. They were describing what they believed it was. In Navajo tradition, rainbows are not decorative weather phenomena. They are sacred pathways and corridors between the human world and the spiritual one. A rainbow turned permanently to stone is, in that framework, a permanent threshold, a doorway that never closes. And like any doorway into a sacred space, like the entrance to a cathedral, like the gate of a temple, there are rules about how you approach it. The Navajo tradition teaches that special prayers must be said before passing beneath the arch. Neglecting to say those prayers, according to the belief passed through generations, is believed to bring misfortune or hardship to whoever ignores them. This is not a recent invention, or a legal strategy, or a political claim. Archaeologists excavating at the foot of the bridge in 1994 found a hearth that confirms human ceremony at this exact spot, going back at least 1,500 years. People were praying here before the Norman conquest of England, before the Crusades, before the Aztec Empire. And here is the thing that makes the warning at the sign feel less like a preference and more like an inheritance. The National Park Service did not create that warning. They inherited it. They put it on a sign because the people who held this place asked them to, and because when those people tried everything else, the sign was all they had left. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because before we can understand what the Navajo lost here, we have to understand what they had, and who came to take it from them. The year is 1909. Two men want the same thing, to be the first Anglo-American to stand beneath Rainbow Bridge. Dr. Byron Cummings is a University of Utah archaeologist and a serious scholar of the Southwest. William B. Douglas is a government surveyor. Both have heard, from separate sources, that somewhere in the labyrinth of canyons around Navajo Mountain there is a stone arch of extraordinary size, an arch that the Navajo and Paiute people have known and visited for centuries. Both men want to find it, and neither man is willing to let the other get there first. They set out on separate expeditions, guided by men who actually knew the land. Cummings had a guide named Nasya Bagay, a Paiute whose father had reportedly visited the bridge. Douglas had Jim Mike, another local guide with knowledge of the canyon routes. On the fourth night of the search, the expedition's spirits were failing. They had been in rugged, dangerous country for days, backtracking through canyons, looking for routes across rivers. Then, around 10 o'clock at night, from out of the darkness, Nasya Bagay walked into their camp. He had found them. He knew the way. On August 11th, 1909, the combined group began their final trek to the bridge. When they came in sight of it, the two expedition leaders spurred their horses to be first beneath the arch. John Wetherill, a famous southwestern trader and one of the guides, diffused the competition by simply riding ahead of both of them and beating them to it. The two men who had organized this race to claim discovery arrived second and third, behind a man who had spent decades working respectfully alongside the people of this land. President William Howard Taft designated 160 acres around Rainbow Bridge as a national monument on May 30th, 1910, less than a year after the Anglo expeditions found it, though it had been a source of worship and ceremony for local native peoples for at least 1,500 documented years. The designation protected the geology. It said nothing about protecting what the Navajo called the spirit of the place. For the next 50 years, this largely didn't matter. Rainbow Bridge was extraordinarily difficult to reach. The only way in was a multi-day overland journey on horseback through some of the most demanding canyon terrain in North America. Very few tourists made it. The site remained, in practice, remote enough that the ceremonies and the reverence could continue largely undisturbed. Then the government built a dam. Glen Canyon Dam was completed in 1966. It sits on the Colorado River in northern Arizona, and the reservoir it created, Lake Powell, is one of the largest man-made lakes in the United States. When the water rose, it flooded 186 miles of canyon. It submerged ancestral Puebloan ruins. It drowned pictograph sites, and it crept directly into Bridge Canyon, rising beneath Rainbow Bridge and changing the way the entire world could access it. Before the dam, the journey to Nonnezoshe was a pilgrimage by definition. It took days. It required a guide. It demanded something of the person making the trip. After Lake Powell, a motorboat could get you there from a marina in a few hours. Boat tours began bringing up to 1,000 tourists a day to what had once been one of the most isolated sacred sites in North America. The National Park Service installed a dock. They built a trail. They printed a brochure, and the Navajo medicine men watched their sacred site become a day trip. A medicine man named Lamar Badoni, along with Teddy Holliday, Betty Holliday, Jimmy Goodman, and other Utah Navajo religious leaders, filed suit in U.S. District Court on September 3, 1974. They argued that the rising waters of Lake Powell had drowned a holy water spring inside the monument. They argued that a prayer site used for generations was now underwater. They argued that the flood of tourists made it impossible to hold ceremonies at the bridge. And they argued something that the American legal system had never been asked to rule on in quite this way: that the United States government had, through the operation of Glen Canyon Dam, literally drowned their gods. The case was called Badoni versus Higginson. It went through the district court and then to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. The court ruled that the government's interest in maintaining the level of Lake Powell was compelling, that cheap electricity and reservoir storage outweighed the plaintiffs' religious interests. Furthermore, the court ruled that accommodating Navajo religious practices at Rainbow Bridge would effectively make it a government-managed shrine, violating the separation of church and state. The ruling gutted the protections that had been written into the 1978 American Indian Religious Freedom Act just 2 years before the appeal was decided. Read that carefully. The court decided that protecting a Native American sacred site from flooding was a First Amendment problem, that it would amount to the government establishing a religion. The legal logic used to protect religious freedom in America was turned against the people asking for it. Lamar Badoni and the other medicine men lost. The water stayed. The tourists kept coming. What do you do when the courts say no? In 1995, after years of consultations with 5 tribal governments, the National Park Service built a low rock wall along the trail, approaching the bridge. They revised the monument brochure. They asked that visitors approach Rainbow Bridge as they would a church. They also deleted descriptions of the historic hiking trails from the brochure, hoping to reduce foot traffic beneath the arch. That same year, something remarkable came out of those tribal consultations that most visitors never hear about. The Park Service agreed not to pave the trail to the bridge with asphalt. Tribal officials had explained that paving would restrict the passage of spirits to and from the underworld. The federal government, quietly and without announcement, changed a construction decision because of what the Navajo believe moves through the ground beneath the bridge. The sign went up. The request was made. And then, in 2001, a conservative legal organization called the Mountain States Legal Foundation sued the National Park Service, not to protect the sacred site, but to force the government to remove the signs asking visitors not to walk beneath it. The foundation claimed that the National Park Service's posted requests not to walk under the bridge constituted the promotion of Native American religion in violation of the Constitution. The same legal argument that had defeated the Navajo in 1980 was now being used to remove the only protection they had managed to obtain. The case was eventually resolved without removing the signs. The rock wall and the voluntary compliance request remained, but the principle had been tested again. In American law, asking people to respect a sacred space was legally borderline. Crossing a sacred threshold without prayer was constitutionally protected. In April 2017, 108 years after Byron, Cummings and William Douglas raced their horses toward the arch, the National Park Service designated Rainbow Bridge a traditional cultural property. It was the first site in Utah to receive that designation, formally recognizing the cultural and religious significance that the Navajo, Paiute, Hopi and Ute peoples had maintained for over a millennium. It is not a ban. It is not enforceable. It does not prevent anyone from walking beneath the arch. It is a recognition, formal, documented, official, that what the native peoples of this region said about this place was always true and was always known, and was disregarded anyway. The sign is still there. Most visitors still walk past it. And here is the thing that stays with me when I think about Rainbow Bridge and the tradition that surrounds it. The Navajo did not invent the prohibition on walking beneath the arch as a legal strategy in 1974. They did not create the name Nonnezoshe to attract preservation status. The warnings, the prayers, the belief that something passes through this place that requires acknowledgement, those things were here 1,000 years before the monument designation, before the lawsuit, before the dam, before the tourists, before the photographs. The arch formed roughly 200 million years ago, carved by water flowing from Navajo Mountain into Bridge Canyon, working its way through Jurassic sandstone, one grain at a time. And for as long as human beings have lived in this canyon country, for at least 1,500 years of documented occupation, and likely much longer, they looked at what that water made, and they decided it was not simply a rock formation. They decided a rainbow had hardened here, that the boundary between worlds had taken physical form and was now visible, tangible, standing in the canyon, that the correct response to that was not to walk beneath it carelessly, but to stop and speak and ask permission before you crossed. Maybe that is a religious belief. Maybe it is a metaphor for something that does not translate cleanly into English. Maybe it is a record, carried in oral tradition, of something that happened in this specific place and was important enough that every generation since has been told about it. Or maybe, and this is the possibility that I think is hardest for the modern world to sit with, maybe the people who have lived in a place for 1,000 years know something about it that a tourist on a dayboat does not. The sign at Rainbow Bridge asks for voluntary cooperation. It has no legal force. It cannot compel you. The arch is 290 feet tall, and it will stand long after everyone who argued about it in court has been forgotten. But the name they gave it has not changed. It is still Nonnezoshe, still the rainbow turned to stone. Still, according to the tradition that was here first, a doorway that asks you, before you walk through it, to say something. What you say is up to you.